Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network, Groong Week in Review. This show was recorded on October 9, 2023. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
And here are the major topics we'll touch on today. Since there's been a huge flare-up in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict since Saturday, and Israel is a deeply allied state with Azerbaijan, events there certainly have echoes all the way back to the South Caucasus. So we're going to discuss that, especially since our guest has expertise in Israeli foreign affairs. Then we're going to talk about the state of the Artsakh refugees in Armenia, how the Pashinyan government is handling them, and what the future holds for them. Finally, we're going to analyze the current state of the Armenian-Azerbaijani negotiations since Aliyev was a no-show in Granada, Spain. Why didn't he show up? What does it mean for the negotiations and where to hold the negotiations? How is Iran responding to these situations? To talk about these issues, we have with us Dr. Sergei Melkonian, who is an academic director in the Armenian Research Foundation. He served as an assistant to President of Armenia, Armen-Sarkisyan, on Russia and Middle East politics. Sergei is currently a research fellow at APRI Armenia and the Institute of Oriental Studies. And also, he is an assistant professor at Yerevan State University and the Russian-American University. He is a co-founder of the Armenian Project NGO. Hello and welcome, Sergei.
Hi, Sergei.
Thank you.
All right. On Saturday, Hamas and Israel clashed on the border of the Gaza Strip. Over 800 Israelis are reportedly dead, with over 2,000 injured. I checked these numbers a couple of hours ago, so they are probably worse now. The Palestinians report over 350 dead and over 2,300 injured. It was a very uncharacteristic war in the sense that Palestinian guerrillas achieved unexpected results in their offensives, although Israel is now striking back and recovering some of the lost positions and villages. Sergei, since you follow Israeli affairs closely, we thought we'd start our show on this topic today. So, what brought on this round of violence? Who started it? And why? And why now?
Thank you. That's a really complicated question. I'll try to separate it in two parts, at least. First, what was the aim of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other groups that act in Gaza Strip? Like in all conflicts, there are different dimensions. First dimension is national one. So there was no, until for today, any real alternative to agenda that Hamas was pushing forward. Fatah and other organizations, they were not able to bring real Palestinian narrative into Israel-Palestine dialogue. So that's why the only relevant, touchable result from Palestinian perspective, only Hamas was able to bring here on Israel-Palestine track. Second, and the most important dimension in this case is regional one. What was the goal? Because it was clear that Hamas is not able to occupy part of Israel or to break the lines and lift the blockade, reach the Palestinian, the West Bank. I mean, they do not have so much military capabilities to do that. So what is the regional level of this confrontation? As I see, their main goal is bringing back the Palestinian agenda into Middle Eastern agenda. Starting from the uprising process that launched from 2011 in the Middle East, the Palestinian agenda was marginalized. So it was on the second point on regional agenda. Then, when Syrian war started, it was not even part of Middle Eastern discourse. So that allowed Israel to launch the dialogue with Arab states and to start the normalization process with Arab Emirates and some other countries. Now Israel was on its way of finalizing the peace deal with Saudi Arabia. And the only obstacle of Arab world and Israel normalization process traditionally was Palestinian case. And now bringing back this case into regional agenda, it does not allow to reach a peace deal and to set Israel on the political map on the Middle East. The problem from Palestinian perspective is if Israel reach agreement with all Arab countries, it means that Palestinians should forget about the two states solution and the peace might be only on the base of unilateral concessions. So this is why they changed the game, and that's, as I said, that was the real goal of their attack. Now, the second part of the answer: why did they decide to organize their attack right now? Two important points that we should pay attention. First, Israeli society was at least extremely divided. What does it mean? When Netanyahu decided to push forward his legal reform, Israeli society was polarized in two camps. Obviously, that created a lot of problems in security sphere, and head of Mossad, head of Shin Bet, and some other former officers from Israeli security services raised this case that this internal problem will create a lot of challenge on Palestinian agenda, as they call Palestinian arena and northern arena. They mean Hezbollah and Syrian dimension. So we should underline that the government was weak because they focused mostly on internal challenges rather than external one. The second point, that for Israel, modus operandi was conducting airstrikes against Gaza Strip, against Hamas positions in Gaza Strip, conducting airstrikes against Iranian and pro-Iranian proxies acting on Syrian soil. And third, they conducted limited, geographically special operations on Western Bank, that only special services with limited efforts and limited capabilities took part. And that was real modus operandi of Israel against its challenge that it faced against Palestinian dimension. So modus operandi changed. Israel was not ready, obviously, for such attack. I don't like such conspirology on other cases, because Hamas really changed the game on Israeli arena. First time from first Arab-Israel war, Palestinians were able to set control over Israeli cities and villages. That was the first time since the first Arab-Israeli war that they were really clashed in the cities. Palestinians changed the Tzahal, Israel Defense Forces, image. Like, they really changed they affected their capabilities, they affected their agenda. They were able to capture senior officers, dozens of civilians and soldiers. So they really changed the real situation in Israeli security sphere. And this is the biggest challenge for Israeli security for last decades. For example, the last Israeli limited operation against Islamic Jihad in Gaza was in 2021. That was also a limited operation. The more large-scale attack against Gaza was in 2014, and when Israel mobilized around 80,000 soldiers, but now Israel mobilized in 48 hours more than 300 soldiers, 300,000 more than.
Yeah.
And this is, I'm not sure that Israel really will able to achieve its goals in a short term. That's impossible, because what is Gaza Strip? Gaza Strip is around 365 square kilometers, a little bit bigger than Yerevan, and the population is from 2 to 3 million.
Right.
Like, it's Armenian population.
Extremely dense, small area.
Yeah, the problem is that they do not have a real experience of a large-scale military operation.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the only force in the Middle East that has real best experience in this case is Hezbollah. So Hezbollah took part in Syrian warfare more than 10 years. At least more than half Hezbollah members, they took part in that war. So they have biggest experience on warfare in villages, in cities. Urban warfare. They have really big capabilities to destroy Israeli national security system. This is why for Israel was extremely important to have any leverage against Hezbollah. This is why they asked the US to join and bring its forces. Obviously, US is not going to take part in a military operation in Gaza Strip, but their presence, from Israeli perspective, should bring some leverage against Hezbollah, against some other Iranian proxies that acting on Syrian territory, because Israel cannot act both on northern arena, southern arena, and in case of the attacks that might take part on Western Bank. Like Israel national security system is not ready for such challenge in three different dimensions.
Sergei, Netanyahu and Israel have likened this event to 9/11.
Yes.
You know what happened after 9/11? America went on a rampage through a lot of countries around the globe. What dangers might this conflict bring to the rest of the region? How big is the possibility of escalations, possibly even into South Caucasus, Iran, and things like that?
Yeah, there is. I'm not sure that there is a high risk of large-scale escalation, but still there is a risk, because in case of Israeli operation will take more than 2 or 3 months in Gaza Strip. Obviously, Israeli system economy will be weaker and weaker. So Israel will need more resources from the US, like it was, for example, in 2021, when Iron Dome was not able to. So the reserves were over.
Yeah, their defenses were overwhelmed at the time.
Yeah, and according to Israeli intelligence, Hezbollah has more than 100,000 of missiles.
Mm-hmm.
So Iron Dome cannot fix all these problems. I mean, in air defense sphere. So in case of Hezbollah, see that there is an opportunity to launch a large-scale attack against Israel, because Israel will lose a lot of resources in Gaza Strip. It might provoke Hezbollah to interfere and to open the second front. And in this case, Israel has its own options to strike the Iranian positions in Syria, and Iran may strike Israeli position on northern part of Iraq. And I mean, moving from the west to the east of the Middle East, we see the South Caucasus, where there is Israeli presence, and there might be also some tensions on Iran-Azerbaijan border. But for us, I mean, for Armenia, the biggest challenge might be if Iran pays a lot of attention to Gaza case, will allocate all its resources to support Gaza or Hezbollah, and the South Caucasus will be not the top priority of Iranian foreign and defense policy. And Turkey and Azerbaijan definitely may use this window of opportunity to launch not a large scale, but possibly limited attack, for example, to take the so-called enclaves back, to set their control over strategic communications, and to open by force the different routes of so-called Zangezur corridor. I mean, this might be a really big regional mess. It depends on Israeli capabilities to try to solve this problem in a short term.
Yeah, we're actually going to come to those questions in just a minute about the Zangezur corridor and the road through Iran, etc. So give me just one more question in this. There are Israeli reports that they've apprehended Turkish supplies and logistics targeted for the Palestinians. Meanwhile, the Azeris are fairly clearly pro-Israel. How are the Turks, and by that I mean both Turkey and Azerbaijan, playing this issue? And also, how do you think that Armenia should react to these affairs?
Turkey is directly involved in this conflict. For example, head of Hamas Ismail Haniyeh met personally Erdogan in July this year.
Yeah.
Then Israeli services didn't allow to pass explosion materials from Turkey to Gaza Strip on September this year, like 3 weeks ago. At the same time, Azerbaijan doesn't take any real participation like Turkey does, because Turkey traditionally wants to play a major role in the region, Turkey being as one of the most important regional center of powers. Turkey also wants to be a leader in Islamic world, like what, for example, Turkey did in 2021 when Israel launched a large-scale attack against Gaza. Mm-hmm. Erdogan started its process and he wanted to create an Islamic coalition to deter Israel, but he failed. He didn't succeed. Now, Turkey, its position a little bit changed. For example, Turkey insists on two-state solution, like most of Arab countries, like even Saudi Arabia, stated that the problem of this confrontation is that some Palestinian territories are still under Israeli occupation. So that was the official statement from Saudi Arabia. So in Arab world, in Islamic world, there is a clear position of at least two-state solution. Azerbaijan is not going to play an active role because Azerbaijan see that he may lose at least temporary one of its major ally, I mean Israel, and the only ally will be Turkey. And at the same time, Azerbaijan might be partly targeted by Iran. So this is high-level game for Azerbaijan, as Azerbaijan obviously is not going to take an active part there.
What should Armenia's reaction be to these affairs? Should it basically be quiet and observe, or should it come out with any kind of a statement?
I think Armenia should focus at least on two important aspects. First, to secure its quota in Jerusalem, like focusing only on its national interest.
Right.
And second, to be prepared for a large-scale attack from Azerbaijan. So obviously, Armenia shouldn't take any part of this conflict. So this is not Armenian war. And even there are no any Armenian allies who are involved in this conflict. So Armenia shouldn't take any part, at least officially. But if there is opportunity to limit somehow Israeli possibilities to supply weapons to Azerbaijan, maybe Armenia can play some role in this case, but I'm not sure. So Armenia should focus first, securing its presence in Jerusalem, securing its citizens, and preparing for a new war here.
Okay, let's come back to our regular issues. The issue, obviously, of Artsakh is on the top of our minds since the depopulation of Artsakh, when 100,000 Armenians were forcibly removed from their indigenous homeland. We've been asking all of our analysts the same question. In your opinion, Sergei, is the Artsakh conflict over? What does the future of Artsakh portend?
I disagree that this conflict is over, because Artsakh conflict is only part of biggest Armenian-Turkish conflict. So there was no Kars conflict, there was no Van conflict, there is no Nakhichevan case, there is no Artsakh conflict. So Artsakh is only part of biggest Armenian-Turkey conflict. First. Second, for me, this conflict is not over. First, there is still opportunity to keep at least officially Artsakh Republic acting from, for example, from Armenian territory. So we should keep the infrastructure. I mean, present administration, National Assembly, Parliament, keep Artsakh Republic government. They can act from Armenian territory. Maybe it takes 10 years, maybe it takes 20 years, maybe it takes 30 years, but we should wait until the window of opportunity to move this all infrastructure to act again from Stepanakert. Third, this conflict is not over because we have the legal dimension. So we have our constitution, I mean Armenian constitution. We have our Independence Act. We have Supreme Court decision, a Supreme Council decision from July 1992, according to which Armenia cannot recognize Artsakh as a part of Azerbaijan. So we have both legal base, we have infrastructure that might act now and wait the best time.
On that note, do you think that Armenia would host a government in exile?
I mean, this Nikol government will not, obviously, and they will explain that in this case, we will provoke Azerbaijan and Turkey to attack because we do not recognize their territorial integrity, we do not respect their sovereignty, etc., etc. So it depends on political will. Current government, obviously, they won't keep any officials, and I don't have any doubts. Like in case of Azerbaijan, demand to give them some former Artsakh officials, some former Armenian officials who directly participated in decision-making process during First Artsakh War, during April War. and one day they may be in jail in Baku. I have no doubt that Nicole will give them to Aliyev.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also have no doubt they would surrender those officials, unfortunately.
Yeah. The problem is, if we analyze, we see that both Azerbaijan and current Armenian de facto government, they have same enemies. So the first enemy were Artsakhtsis from Nicole's perspective, and from Azerbaijan perspective, yes, Nagorno-Karabakh was the biggest problem. Second, officials like Sergei Sargsyan, Robert Kocharan, Arkady Ghukasyan, Bako Saakyan. From Nicole's perspective, like they were all of them were enemies, like from Azerbaijani perspective. From Turkish perspective, the next threat is Armenian diaspora.
Right.
There were also official statements that until there is such diaspora, we cannot reach peace here in the region. So only this government, I mean Armenian government, they also target diaspora. They do not allow to a lot of representatives from our communities in Europe and Russia to come to Armenia. The same is with, for example, with opposition. Like there was Mevlut Çavuşoğlu's statement. Until there is such a position, radical, revanchist, etc., we cannot bring peace in the region. The same statements we hear from Pashinyan. The same, for example, target is Armenian Church that officially did statements against Nicole government after 2020 war. And our church is also targeted by Azerbaijan and by Turkey. The last example is our army. Azerbaijan stated that Armenia should stop its military build-up. Armenia shouldn't do anything. The same as Nicole is doing. Armenia didn't conduct any military exercise until after 2020 war. So a lot of our officers, generals, they are in jail here in Yerevan. The same officers are in jail. I mean, their colleagues, like the same rank officers are in jail in Baku. So if we analyze who are the enemies of current Armenian government, I mean, both officials, institutions, diaspora, church, etc., we see that so they have more point of intersections of interest.
Yeah, Sergei, as Hovik said a little bit earlier, in the past 2 weeks, over 100,000 Artsakh refugees flooded into Armenia. This is on top of the 40,000 plus that were already in Armenia since the war in 2020. What options do these refugees have? Can they ever return to their homeland? Actually, should they even consider this at the cost of living under Azerbaijani rule as an oppressed minority? What opinions do you have about the state of these folks?
I had a lot of conversation with refugees because obviously Armenian government is not able to feel its responsibilities. So Armenia stated that we are ready to host our refugees, etc. But if we see the conditions, where do they stay? That's really terrible conditions. All of them, they are not ready to go back. For half of them, Artsakh is finished. They lost their trust in anything. They do not see any real opportunity to come back. And this is the biggest problem. Because from their perspective, there are a lot of people who, for example, moved from Baku, Sumgait, Maraga to Artsakh. Then they moved from Artsakh during 2020 war to Armenia and came back. Now they are refugee for the third time. So they are not ready to stay there. Moreover, they are not going to send their children to stay there. I don't see any instrument how to keep them, because this is extremely important to keep them in Armenia. Because a lot of them, they are planning to move to Russia, to their friends, relatives. It's extremely important for us to keep them here. But those conditions that Armenian government created for them, it's impossible to keep them.
Is Pashinyan's government looking at this through a humanitarian lens or a political lens? Are they refugees or are they IDPs, internally displaced persons?
As far as I know, there is no real decision how to call them from Pashinyan's perspective, because Pashinyan doesn't want to create even 1% problem in relations with Turkey and Azerbaijan in order to bring peace as soon as possible. And there is a legal problem. So it's complicated to get a refugee status, but at the same time, for example, Azeris from Nagorno-Karabakh, they got refugee status in 90s in Azerbaijan. Armenian official position, so you are Armenian citizens. You cannot be a refugee. But the problem is that they are refugees. They should be like refugees because they don't have any place to stay. Most of them, they really do not have any relatives here. Some of them do not have any friends, so they are not attached with Armenia somehow. They have only Armenian passport, and that's it. And I don't see that this government is really want to work with them because a lot of work is conducted by non-governmental organizations, both from diaspora and from Armenia, to provide medicine, to provide food, to provide clothes because winter is coming. We do not see such readiness from officials to support. Moreover, in different official institutions, government institutions, they have the list of these organizations. And if, for example, some Armenians from Artsakh who are somewhere in Armenia call them for help, they just send them the list of these organizations or give some phone numbers, and they tell like, okay, you can ask them for help, do not call us, and that's it.
Yeah, and it seems, at least my own observation is that the effect, at least, has been that Artsakhtsis are spread out all over Armenia. There isn't a refugee center you can go to, or an organization maybe even, where you can inquire, okay, what is the state of Artsakhtsis? And even within Yerevan, I have school kids, so I know that schools are accommodating more and more children from Artsakhtsis. But I always wonder how this will affect their voice, because it seems to be spread across and diluted down, so because these people are not living in the same place. Most likely they, as you say, they want to forget about going back, but it is important. So how do we keep these people engaged and fighting for their cause and help them? That's always on top of my mind.
At least if we can keep their children here, I mean, in schools, in universities, we can provide some job that will be more than enough. This is, for example, with me and our colleagues, we try to keep at least families that we know that are ready to move to Russia, and we're trying to find them something to have roots here even in Yerevan, to stay here at least in a short-term perspective. Okay, they know, for example, I have this job, my son is going to study at this university at least for 5 years, so at least for 5 years they will stay here. So I think we should focus on this at least for short-term run to keep them. Otherwise, any humanitarian assistance is not enough. They will try to collect money, buy ticket, one-way ticket, and that's it. Also, there are some initiatives how they try to keep Artsakhtsi from one village in another village, just to keep the language, to keep the culture, just to not spread and then illuminate it in a long-term run. So there are all different initiatives, but the problem is all of them are on the level of NGOs. So this is not enough for such big challenge.
All right, now let's talk about the state of the negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The Granada meeting last week was in some ways disappointing, and in other ways even more disappointing, if you ask me. First, Azerbaijani President Aliyev did not show up. He wanted Turkish President Erdogan to attend this summit along with Pashinyan, but European leaders and Armenia, I believe, sort of rejected it. So neither Aliyev nor Erdogan showed up in Spain, but Aliyev's absence did not prevent Pashinyan from signing something anyway. And he basically signed something that he had only said verbally. Essentially, he fulfilled Aliyev's demand and signed a written statement formalizing his recognition of Azerbaijan's sovereignty, specifying 86,600 square kilometers of land area. And immediately after this signing, Azerbaijani diplomats and the media began circulating demands that Armenia should cede control over 8 villages it still holds. Sergei, why did Pashinyan sign a written statement when Aliyev was not even present?
What happened in Granada was a crime, because all such statements, all such declarations, they violate our internal law. The statement is against our constitution, against our Declaration of Independence, against our Supreme Council decision, etc., etc. So this is a crime. So there is no legal base for such statements, for such signatures, etc. As I see from Nicole's perspective, he wants to show to the West, like, I'm ready for the peace. I'm ready to sign anything what Azerbaijan wants. So the problem is Azerbaijan, please put a little bit pressure on Aliyev, and that's it. So there is no another, I can't explain why he did such statements, such decision, because from Azerbaijani perspective, if Azerbaijan doesn't recognize Armenian territorial integrity, so it means that probably there is no Armenia, there is no territorial integrity. So they call Armenia Western Azerbaijan. So what is the problem to occupy at least part country, then another part of country? So from Nicole's perspective, yes, it tries to bring peace, tries to show that I'm ready for the peace, even on the base of unilateral concessions. So the problem is Aliyev, but Aliyev is playing a real good game. What is he doing? He didn't took part in meeting in Granada. He didn't say anything. Now he stated that he's ready 3+3 format. So he's going to sell his position to Russia and Iran. Like, do you see, guys? Nicole is bringing the West in the region. I didn't took part. So what can you offer to me? Can you offer me something better than the West can offer with Nicole in Brussels? If yes, okay, I'm ready to continue negotiations on your platform, or 3+3. So he's playing a good game. At the same time, when Nicole signed this statement in Granada, he's limited in his actions. So he cannot ask Moscow, okay, let's try to find something on your platform, or let's to discuss something on 3+3, because so he's limited because he signed this statement, and Azerbaijan is free in this case. So this, I mean, he has more maneuver to get more from Armenia.
Does Azerbaijan's boycott or essentially mean that the risk of a war is higher?
Of course, the risk of the war is really high. So there are two options, or it will happen until the end of this year, or it will happen on the first part of next year. Why first part of next year? Because March 17, elections in Russia. Then in summer, there will be elections in the EU. Then US will focus on its election that will take place on November. So all regional, all key players, they will focus on internal problems. At the same time, Azerbaijan can continue to push forward his agenda, and all these actors, they can, so their position might be, okay, let's try to keep the new status quo if you provide some guarantees, etc. At the same time, if Russian counteroffensive, they are preparing counteroffensive in Ukraine, if it fails, for example, and if Iran allocates more resources in Gaza, or for Hezbollah, sure, Azerbaijan and Turkey will use this opportunity. And the problem is they have legal base for that. So as Aliyev stated, as you, Hovik, mentioned, so Armenia keeps under occupation Azerbaijani territories. So why they are staying there? So we are just coming to bring back, and no one will use any sanctions. No one obviously will not punish Azerbaijan because there is a legal base. And the second step might be
the legal base. You mean Pashinyan's signing?
Yeah,
the
I mean
statement?
Pashinyan's statement in Granada. So there is a legal base. So let's record. Pashinyan created a legal base for Azerbaijan to attack Armenia. That's for sure. The next step might be opening Zangezur corridor by force. It means that, okay, Armenia still keeps under occupation our territories. Armenia doesn't want to provide communications according to Article 9, November 2020 statement. So did Armenia sign such statement? Yes. Does Armenia feel its obligations? No. So we will do it by force. And so there won't be any tools that EU, US, or Russia will use against Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan is making pressure on Armenia. Armenia officially does unilateral concessions, and Azerbaijan is taking what he wants.
Sergei, so talking about that legal basis, is there any doubt that when Pashinyan mentioned the 86,600, he didn't mean the enclaves? Because I know in one interview, he said, yes, it does also mean the enclaves, but we also have Artsakh. Is there any ambiguity that Armenia could use to?
No, Hovik, no. It includes Nagorno-Karabakh, it includes Artsakh, and it includes so-called enclaves. So that's for sure. So there is no second opinion on that.
Okay. And for the listeners who don't know about the status of the enclaves, can you tell us what is the danger? Because I think even Azerbaijan claims it's about 100 square kilometers. Meanwhile, they have about 200 square kilometers of newly captured territory in areas such as Kut, in Gegarkunik, in Sunik. So what is the significance of these enclaves, and why does Azerbaijan want to have them so much?
Azerbaijan already keeps under its control around 220 square kilometers of Armenian sovereign territory as a result of attack 2021, 2022. So now Azerbaijan keeps under visual control all strategic communications on the eastern part of Armenia, Armenian eastern part. What is the importance of enclaves? Enclaves, most of them, they are located in Tavush region, and they are situated on strategic communication that connects Armenia with Georgia. And we have population there. So these enclaves, they are so-called enclaves. They are inside Armenian territory. They are not on the border. So there is a gap between the border and the enclave. And in this gap, there are Armenian villages, the Armenian population, there are water resources, and there are strategic communications. And if Azerbaijan wants to get direct access and set its control over the enclaves, so it means that this part of at least Tavush region will be the Armenians. So Armenians should leave this area. The total depopulation of this region will take place. The same will be in Arat region, where is Tigranashen. Tigranashen is located on strategic communication that connects Armenia with Iran. So also there are Armenians who are living there. And the problem is, this is the part of the war strategy. What Azerbaijan did in Artsakh, exactly the same they are going to do with Armenia. They took control over the Lachin corridor. They started blockade. Now, if Azerbaijan has an opportunity to set its control over strategic communications, they will partly create blockade for Armenia. Like, for example, do you remember when, I don't know why, but as far as I know, Armen Grigoryan, head of Security Council, unilaterally decided to transfer part of Goris-Kapan strategic route to Azerbaijan.
Of course.
Our forces, they were there, so it was fully under our control. And it was extremely complicated to reach southern part of Armenia. So this is why Nicole decided to launch.
It still is, yeah.
It still is, because when I came back from Iran by car in the end of July this year, that was really complicated. That's terrible route. So this is not alternative route, because this is the only one. So there is no alternative route. The same will be with our communications that are connecting us with Georgia, that are connecting us with Iran. So this is the same, for example, with Israel is doing with Gaza now. They cut all electricity supply, they organized sea blockade, etc., etc. The same is Turkey is doing in Syria. So the same Azerbaijan did in Artsakh. Blockade, control over strategic communications, and cutting all territory in 3 different parts. So they are going to deal with us like in a short-term run until they have such window of opportunity. Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about platforms for negotiation for a moment. There are signs that Aliyev may be looking to move the negotiation platform away from Europe at this point in time. On Sunday, Aliyev said that he would start talks with Armenia immediately in Georgia if Pashinyan were to accept that. And additionally, today, Russia has also offered to organize a meeting of the foreign ministers in Bishkek, which Pashinyan did not attend. And also, Russians said that they would collaborate with the US and the EU, saying that the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict is not resolved yet. Russian experts that I've read are also predicting that Aliyev will try to move the negotiations back to Russia or somewhere away from the West. Is Aliyev trying to dump the Western platform and move negotiations back to Russia, Georgia, or the 3+3, which has been mentioned again recently?
I'm not sure. I will explain why. Because Azerbaijan succeeded only on Western platforms. Nicole's statements, April 2021 from Brussels. So international community asks us to reduce our
lower our bar.
Yeah, our bar towards Artsakh's status.
Right.
The statement was he did from Brussels. Next, last year in Prague, Nicole agreed to continue negotiations based on Almaty Declaration. So he agreed that Artsakh is a part of Azerbaijan. 2023, this year, Granada. Nicole is justifying Azerbaijani attack against Armenia and is creating a legal base to transfer so-called enclaves to Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijan achieved all his goals on Western platforms. At the same time, he didn't succeed, for example, in Moscow in 2021 because Moscow insisted to freeze the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. From Russian perspective, to have its presence, its peacekeepers in a long-term perspective. At the same time, it doesn't contradict our interests, so we're also interested to keep the status unclear, to keep Armenians there. And I'm not sure that Aliyev is going to move from the West to Russia. For Aliyev, it's much more preferable to reach one-to-one agreement, for example, in Georgia, when Armenia will not have any support from Russia, when Armenia will not have any support from Iran, in case of 3+3 platform. So one-to-one, obviously, Aliyev will get a lot from Nicole. In case comparing with 3+3, there will be a lot of discussions, sessions. They should take into account Turkish position, Russian, Iranian, etc. So as far as I see, for Aliyev, it's much more preferable to reach a deal, for example, in Georgia, one-to-one with Nicole, to show that we are bringing peace in the region and we reach peace here in the region, not in Moscow, not in Washington, D.C., not in Brussels, etc., etc.
Okay, Sergei, but alternatively looked at this issue, what's the incentive for Pashinyan to do that then?
Strategic goal for Pashinyan is bringing peace in the region, so the price doesn't matter. So strategic goal for Pashinyan is reaching peace with Turkey. So this is the biggest goal. So the first step is reaching peace with Azerbaijan. Based also, if it's necessary, this peace might be based on unilateral concessions from Armenian side. So this is not a problem for him. The only problem for him is our security guarantees. The only part who can provide real security guarantees for Pashinyan is Turkey. So no one can provide real security guarantees to him. So this is why he's ready to sign anything.
So with the concern that Pashinyan has agreed to give away the enclaves, like you have said, which will be a chokehold on Armenia's major communication arteries, north and south, the only red line that Armenia seems to have left is the sovereignty over Sunik, despite the demand from Turkey and Azerbaijan of multiple passageways through Armenia's south, or what they call the Zangezur corridor. Armenia has repeatedly stated that it would want to remain, it demands tension of sovereignty over any such road, and has accused both Turkey and Azerbaijan of claiming an extraterritorial corridor. And Iran has firmly backed Armenia on this position that any geopolitical changes are against their interests. The nuance here is that point number 9 of the November 2020 statement, as you also mentioned, which states that, quote, control over transport communications shall be exercised by the border guard service bodies of the FSS of Russia. So in a sense, people are arguing that Armenia has already ceded sovereignty through that statement. My question is, with all the remaining points of the November 9-10 statement apparently being moot, does it make sense for Armenia to simply retract its signature and say that November 9 statement is null and void?
It depends on political will, Olujan. I totally agree with you. It depends on political will. If, for example, we have Armenian-oriented government, they can state that so November 9 statement is not relevant anymore. So there are no peacekeepers in Artsakh. There are no Armenians in Artsakh. So the only part of this deal that was done, we withdrew all our troops from Nagorno-Karabakh, and that's it. So Azerbaijan still keeps in jail our prisoners. Azerbaijan is occupying Armenian territory. Azerbaijan regularly violates ceasefire regime, etc., etc. So the only side who conducted agreements, that was Armenian side. It depends from political will. And coming back from the first part of your question, the problem is, for example, do you remember Security Council Secretary Armen-Grigoryan's statement? So he stated that there won't be any Russian presence on these communications. So from his perspective, or from perspective of part of decision makers here who want to kick out Russia from the region, they want to keep communications under their control, but this is impossible. So Armenia cannot keep, at least for today, unfortunately, we cannot keep communications that are connecting Turkey with Azerbaijan only under control. So, I mean, from security perspective, we cannot do that. So physically, this is impossible. And there is one more important point in this game. Azerbaijani agenda of bringing 120,000 Azeris to Syunik, Gegharkunik, and Vayodzor. And according to this agreement, and Nikol and Aliyev, they agreed on that. Armenia should provide security guarantees to these Azerbaijani citizens. Armenia should provide also assistance to find places to stay. They will bring some papers with their address, where they lived previously, etc., etc. So this is a big disaster. So this is a big disaster for Armenia in the short term. This is not, I mean, the Syunik is not only about corridor. Azerbaijan has more cards to play against Armenia, and Armenia has nothing.
Sergei, in the past few days, Iran has stepped up its diplomatic activities around reducing tensions in the south of Armenia to prevent an outbreak of violence or possibly even all-out war. Reportedly, Iran and Azerbaijan have agreed to a railroad through Iran to connect Azerbaijan to Nakhichevan. And the Turks have said that this is an alternative to the railroad through Mehri, which is considered part of the so-called Zangezur corridor. Additionally, Azerbaijan and Iran have announced joint military exercises. Their diplomatic row over the attack on the Azerbaijani consulate in Tabriz also seems to be on the mend at this point. Can you expand on the geopolitics around this road or connection through Iran? What are Iran's goals and how is it achieving them?
I texted to my colleagues from Iran what is going on. Do you see really that it will change the game? All of them answered, so we are not idiots. So they clearly say that this is not the part of the game. So the Zangezur corridor through Armenian territory is still on the agenda in Turkey and Azerbaijan from Iranian perspective. So this is a temporary solution for Azerbaijan and Turkey for short-term run. But for the long term, so the Zangezur corridor through Armenian territory, they will try at least to take it. What about joint military exercise between Iran and Azerbaijan? Iran asked Armenia for military cooperation for a long time. Iran suggested some weapon, military munition, to sign agreement in military and security spheres. Armenia rejected at least all Iranian agenda because Armenia was afraid of sanction regime. But we see that this sanction regime, it has nothing with reality. Because, for example, when I talk with some EU diplomats, they're experts, like for them, it's obvious that they are not going to punish Armenia for a cooperation with Iran. So Azerbaijan is a good example of that. So they conduct joint military exercises with Iran, and no one is going to punish Azerbaijan. From Iranian perspective, Armenia rejects everything. Armenia is not going to cooperate with Iran in security sphere, in other dimensions that are relevant from Iranian perspective. So Armenia is not going to even secure its borders because Armenia does statement, so we are not going to fight for a 30% for sewage. We are not going to fight for these mountains because more than half of the year there is a snow. So from Iranian perspective, the real cannot understand such statements. And they see that so Armenia is not ready to fight for its territorial integrity. At the same time, the only actor here in the South Caucasus who is making the agenda, who is pushing forward this agenda, even by force, is Azerbaijan. So it means that maybe we should deal somehow with Azerbaijan to deter it from attacking Armenia and opening Zangezur corridor, etc., like based on Iranian interests. So this is why they try to reduce the tension. I mean, also on the level of official discourse, and they started cooperation. But I mean, this is not a strategic long-term decision. This is a more tactical short-term decision in order to keep the status quo here in the region. I mean, from Iranian perspective.
Sergei, it's amusing to me, this whole like military cooperation, because you did mention that since the 2020 war, Armenia has not had a single military exercise, either an internal one, a large-scale internal one, or even with partners, large-scale one with partners. And the reason that the excuse used for not having military exercises with Iran was the threat about sanctions, the West will sanction us. Do you think that was an excuse?
Also, Hovik, another excuse was that Azerbaijan would find it provocative if Armenia held military exercises.
Exactly. So is it that basically Pashinyan was afraid or whatever, was acting at the direction of Azerbaijan by not holding any exercises, including one with Iran? If Armenia had legitimate authorities who were concerned about Armenia's national security, how far could Armenia cooperate with Iran in the interests of both countries?
As I see, all decisions that Nicole makes in foreign policy and security policy, so he's feeling Turkish agenda. Everything is related with Turkish agenda. Deterioration of relations with Russia, keeping Iran away from Armenia, Armenia-Azerbaijan rapprochement, etc., etc. So this is all this point, real Turkish agenda here in the South Caucasus. And one important indicator for us, Armenia, at least on the highest official level, Armenia has never blamed Turkey. Yes, Azerbaijan is a bad guy, they occupied our territories, etc., etc. But you will not find any statement, anti-Turkish statement from Armenian officials. So, because this is their strategic goal, to reach a peace deal with Turkey. And from their perspective, any exercises with or cooperation with Iran might provoke Turkey and Azerbaijan. But from Armenian perspective, such exercise, so we suggested to Iranians, for example, to conduct joint exercises. But for example, as I told you before, Armenia conducts its exercise on its part of territory in Sunni. Iran conducts at the same time military exercise on its part of territory. So they are joined in this geographically and from timing perspective, but they are not joined like so they do not conduct in one territory, one state, like in Armenia or in Iran. They like this agenda, but Armenia also rejected to have anything. This is feeling Turkish agenda. So because for Turkey, Iran is going to play a bigger role here in South Caucasus because Russian positions are going to be weaker and weaker. So there is a vacuum of power. Iran is trying to fill this vacuum, and Iran is for sure is competitor, Turkish competitor here in the region. This is why Armenia is blocking all Iranian attempts.
All right. Let's wrap up our topics here. Sergei, first of all, thank you for sharing your insight and analysis on the flare-up in Israel and Gaza. It was very timely to have you on our show with those events. So now I'd like to ask each of you if there's been something on your mind for the past week that you would like to share with our listeners. Hovik, let me go to you first.
Yeah, I'll talk about what I just tweeted a few minutes ago, which is, as Artsakhtsis are now taking refuge in Armenia, many of them are starting to attend school. And today, my son had 2 new classmates from Artsakh, and he couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep because he kept asking why did those kids lose their homes and who's responsible. And as a parent, sometimes it's very difficult to explain to a 6-year-old what is going on, though, no matter what, the situation cannot be escaped. And the same is true for my older children as well. So I consider those Armenians who live outside of Armenia. I know you're very concerned about Armenia because you listen to this podcast, obviously, but consider yourself lucky that you don't have to explain the direct consequences of the war and these refugee problems to your kids. At least, you can have a way to present it to them in a more controlled manner. My kids have to deal with the issue of refugees from Artsakh directly, and we have to find a way to talk to kids in general about this in a way that makes sense for their age level.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but I guess welcome to the club because I also don't sleep at night because of all these problems. Sergei, anything you'd like to share with us?
Yes, maybe two points. First, we all have a responsibility for the future of Armenia. I mean, if we can find jobs for Artsakhtsis, we should do that. If we can keep them here in Armenia and provide good conditions to stay, let's do that. We have to keep these people here in Armenia, and all of us, we have different opportunities, and we can we have to use them today, because tomorrow it might be too late. And the second point is, so the game is not over. It's not finished yet. So we still have our country. We still have national-oriented young generation who are ready to stay here, who are not ready to move from Armenia, who are ready to fight for this country. So we have a real chance to bring back everything. So this is just what's happening now. It is temporary. In the long-term run, we can bring everything back.
All right. Thank you for your thoughts. We're going to leave it there for today. Thank you, Sergei, for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sergei.
Pleasure.
That's our show this week. We hope you found it useful. Please follow us on social media. We'll talk to you next week.